Hello everybody, welcome to Budget and Corporate Scrutiny Management Board. My name's Luke Giles and I'll be chairing today's meeting. In accordance with the 2020 COVID coronavirus regulations, this meeting will be held virtually to facilitate attendance and enable consideration on important matters during this COVID-19 situation. This meeting will therefore be operated differently, with members of the board joining us remotely to consider and vote on any matters. I will ask all attendees to mute their microphone unless they are invited to speak. Please also contact Alex Goddard if you have any technical issues during this meeting. Depending on what device you are logged in with, please use your hand up icon or put a question mark in the chat bar if you wish to ask a question. If you wish to speak during the meeting, please wait for the chair or the facilitator to indicate when you can speak. When you have finished, please remember to mute your microphone. Following any questions, debates, in order to make any decisions on any items, I will ask all members whether they are for or against or whether they would abstain. Please note this meeting is being live streamed online and members of the public and press also by law are allowed to film, audio record, take photos, blog or tweet during this meeting. I would ask all scrutiny members to introduce themselves in turn. Can I start with Laura, please?
Councillor Laura Rollins, Chair of Economy, Skills, Transport and Environment Scrutiny Board.
Elaine Giles, please.
Councillor Elaine Giles, Chair of the Health and Adult Social Care.
Liam, please. Liam, please.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Councillor Liam Priest. I'm the Vice Chair of the Children's Services and Education Scrutiny Board.
I think that's all we've got on at the moment, isn't it? And I would like to also introduce Alex Goddard and Suki Nagra from Democratic Services, who will be supporting this meeting today. Moving on to the agenda. Apologies. Have we had any apologies, Alex?
None received, but Councillor Piper has indicated he may join the meeting late.
Okay. Minutes from the previous meeting. Meetings held on the 20th of August, submitted. Are they accepted as a true record?
Agreed.
Yep. Members to declare any interest on any matters, any party political whips on any matters? No. Additional items of business. There are no urgent items of business. There's just one that we're going to probably have a chat with about the SLT at another meeting. If we can just have that noted in the minutes, please, Alex.
Thank you, Chair.
Item number 5, reset and recovery. I'd like to hand over to David Stevens and Neil Cox to present the item.
Thank you, Chair. I think Neil's going to pick up the item. Thank you.
You're on mute, Neil. We can't hear you.
Sorry, my fault.
It's okay. I'm always.
Thank you. I should also point out I've got my colleague Kate Ashley on the call as well, the strategic lead for the service improvement team, who's also available to answer any questions at the end of the presentation on the report. So really just to give you an overview of the report that went to Cabinet, and this all linked to the presentation that was given at the all-member briefing earlier in the week. This is a follow-on from the report that we took to Emergency Committee sorry, on the 6th of May, which approved the Council's approach to the Reset and Recovery Plan. The response plan, which we had in place, which was previously agreed on the 27th of March, has been continually monitored by the Reset and Recovery Board, and in line with that, response activity is either reduced or ceased as appropriate, and actions have now been closed. And where appropriate, those actions that we included in that initial response plan have been moved into business as usual if they're required over the long term to support service delivery in response to the issues that people are seeing at the moment. When we outlined the plan, we suggested the outcomes from phase 1 was to develop our understanding of the impact of COVID. And on the 18th of June, the Reset and Recovery Board was established 3 working groups, one to look at staff impact, one to look at the community impact, and one to look at the economic impact of COVID. And each group had the remit of sharing the impact intelligence, including that from service users and community intelligence, along with the intelligence from directorate areas, external contacts, and discussing these findings to understand the themes and the future implications for the council and the borough as a whole. They also were asked to agree the key messages from the analysis of the intelligence and feed that into an overall impact report, which is what we've got for you today, with a particular focus on COVID, on existing issues, whether it resulted in new issues for the borough or the council, and also to suggest areas for the next stage of work, which I'll talk a bit about at the end. The impact working groups have now concluded their initial analysis, and although it's acknowledged that obviously the effects of COVID are still being felt and will continue to be felt by communities for some time to come, they give us a baseline from which to work from in terms of moving forward. So in terms of the community impact working group, this was led by the Executive Director of Children's Services and the Director of Housing and Communities. We found that the COVID-19 pandemic, the impact it had had on communities reflected that of the national picture. People experiencing issues around mental health, food insecurity, digital exclusion, financial hardship, and the other social pressures that have gone along with the pandemic, which I'm sure people are only too aware of. As would be expected, BAME communities have been affected greatly by the pandemic, and COVID has exacerbated the existing weaknesses in Sandwell's community related to underlying poverty and deprivation that was already present. And clearly we need to do something different to address these underlying vulnerabilities. So to do this, we need to ensure that engagement is done in the right way and is culturally sensitive. We need to make changes in our own organisation to do things more corporately. And we also need to make sure we've got our resources focused on the areas of most need, and that when implementing changes, we've got a clear measure of success on the impact that these have had. The Economic Impact Working Group, this was led by the Executive Director of Neighbourhoods, and they sought to capture the national and regional intelligence that have been drawn from service provider experiences and insights. We've also taken intelligence from the West Midlands Combined Authority and the Black Country Local Enterprise Partnership. Specifically for Sandwell, the following vulnerabilities have been identified. So Sandwell has got the lowest gross disposable household income per head in the West Midlands. And it's also got the lowest lowest number of high growth firms per population in the West Midlands. The Centre for Progressive Policy predicted a productivity drop of 36% of gross value added in Sandwell during Q2 of 2020. And research also suggests that places with higher entrepreneurial activity than Sandwell have recovered faster after the 2008 crisis, which means they'll have that potential same recovery following this crisis, which is also a challenge for Sandwell. Federation of Small Businesses expects there to be some 25% of small enterprise businesses to close in 2020, and 6.8% of people aged 16 to 64 in Sandwell are self-employed, and around 13,818 are particularly vulnerable within that group for this crisis. So the challenges for Sandwell are obviously the disproportionate impact that the pandemic has had on its young people. So it's resulted in a lack of apprenticeship vacancies, university options, and potential unstable employment moving forward. We know that we're already working from a low skills base. So residents who potentially become unemployed are less skilled or usually less resilient financially, and this creates an impact on their ability to find new employment, or the pressures that finding that new employment can bring. There's going to be an impact on those people who are 50 plus. As with other economic crisis, it's forecast that people aged 50 plus are disproportionately impacted because of where they are in their potential careers. And the skills and employment support demand will be different. So the high skilled cohort, more disadvantaged people will move away from the labour market. We know there's an impact around digital exclusion and poverty, and we hear that sort of loud and clear, and it's still a major barrier for residents, particularly when this is going to be their route into training and upskilling to respond to the economic challenges they may face. And clearly, along with all that, there is the mental health issue around the anxiety of people returning to the workplace or accessing the labour market. In terms of our staff impact working group, this was led by the Interim Director of Human Resources, and the group drew on a series of staff surveys and HR data, as well as staff focus groups and virtual staff conferences to understand the impact on our staff group. So the key messages that we took away were that staff have coped well, adapting quickly to new working styles and maintaining service delivery in clearly very difficult circumstances, and we also recognise that the style of working that people have had to adopt is not suited for everybody for a variety of reasons. So clearly what we need to do now is define a new operating model and embed this within the organisation. We need to have a balance that meets the needs of staff right across the organisation, and need to continue to listen to the voice of our staff through regular surveys and regular interaction. We also need to make sure that our communications with staff and the wider workforce are adapted appropriately in light of remote working, particularly where we've got frontline staff who don't have access to computer systems or the IT that other staff would have. Finally, our financial impact compares with the financial impact, it compares with other areas. So our COVID-related pressures against the in the interim, it looks like we've got a £4.26 million shortfall, but this has improved recently, so we're still understanding the impact of that. Clearly, as we begin to collect council tax and business rates, that figure that changes. But the shortfall will continue for the remainder of the financial year, and we need to incorporate the financial pressures into our medium financial strategy. The next phase of activity is to use the intelligence that we've gathered from the impact analysis and revisit the corporate plan that we've got in place, incorporating all those impacts of COVID into the strategic outcomes that we'd already identified, to make sure that we've got a plan that's fit to meet the needs of both the borough and the council moving forward. Clearly, a significant number of things have changed, and whilst the corporate plan was only agreed in March, we're working in a very different landscape, and we need to put ourselves in a position to respond. So we're going to be establishing some thematic groups around what that corporate plan needs to look like, made up of officers from across the council, and using the impact findings that we've got to redefine the elements that sit under those strategic objectives within the plan, to make sure that we're working and targeting our resources in the right area to respond to the challenges that I've already outlined. Happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you for that. Has anybody got any questions? Liam, would you? Go on, mate, you can come in now. Liam, are you there?
Sorry, Chair, I'm experiencing some technical problems, right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, I think there's a bit of a lovely. I think there's a bit of a delay. I'm experiencing some technical issues. I think it's an issue with my bandwidth, so I'm keeping my camera off for now to try and save it. But I think you're getting what I'm saying a few seconds after I'm saying it. So I have two questions. First of all, I think obviously this has been an unprecedented situation for the council, as it has for everybody in society, really, in every organisation. What have we learned, particularly around our communication when it comes to service delivery and service restart? What have been the lessons learned around that? Have we improved our communication as it's gone on? Have we engaged with residents and stakeholders to gauge what their expectations were in a restart of services? And learned in the case of a second wave or second spike, whatever terminology you want to use, what have we learned so we can deploy in the future and possibly manage expectations a little better. The second question is around the staffing element of the report, and it may be a question for Sue more so than Neil. I note, and Neil highlighted in the report, that the staffing impact group found that most staff have coped well with the working from home arrangements. However, I imagine that wouldn't be the case for everybody. So what has been our offer to staff in terms of mental health, well-being and support, and how well utilised have those services been? I do also have a third question I forgot about, Chair, if I may. My third point is around when we're talking about a new operational structure. I think that's a bit of management speak, and I think it may well be useful to just explain what we mean by a new operational structure, and what in practical terms does that mean for our staff and for the public's perception of the council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Did you get that, Neil?
Yeah, certainly. Shall I take questions 1 and 3, and if Sue's okay for me to hand over to her for question 2? Is that
that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of communication, yeah, clearly we've been tested in this area, both with the staff group and with the community. I'd say we've learned a lot. I think we've utilised channels such as this more effectively than we ever have done. We can stand up meetings and stand up communication quicker than we have done in the past, because we've started to utilise the tools that are available to us. But clearly what we've also learned in that, and there's a common theme around a lot of the impact assessment groups around digital exclusion, is that that's not suitable for everybody. And some of our most vulnerable people aren't able to access the internet, don't have access to a computer, so relying solely on social media and technology as our default method of communication, particularly in a crisis like this, isn't particularly going to help us in future. So we've improved I feel we've improved our communications both with the community and voluntary sector, and how we've engaged them in the ongoing planning and delivery of our work, so that they can use their channels as well to spread that message. I think we've used some innovative ways of engaging different community groups and looking at different routes in to spread the message, so that people aren't getting excluded from that. And we know that we need to continue to build on that. clearly for many years across the council, there's been a push on channel shift, getting everybody's email details, getting everybody's online account set up. And in a perfect world, if we could do that for everybody, that would be absolutely great. But we need to also make sure that we are able to communicate manually and get messages out, and also to be very clear and upfront and plan ahead with those messages. So we take that forward. But I think on the whole, we have done a good job. I think the general consensus from staff and some of the feeling I get back from members is that they're getting more information more consistently in a better form than we probably have done in the past. But it's one of those things, you know, communication, it can always be improved. It can always be better. Just because we've done some things well doesn't mean that we stop working on it and we stop looking at new ways to engage people. So that will be an ongoing theme of our work moving forward. I think in terms of the third point around operating model, well, clearly what we need to make sure, when something like this hits, when there's a pandemic which takes out the whole of the council, it forces you to reflect on, have you got the right continuity arrangements in place? Is there consistency across your departments, which means that these decisions that you all make in terms of your customer, the access that people have got, the support that you're giving to the staff, is as coordinated and as effective as it should be. And through no fault of anybody's, I think we've identified that there's areas where we could align our work more effectively, where we could collectively put the customer at the centre of our decisions, so that we are all delivering a consistent service and providing the same consistent access to people, particularly through periods of service interruption, and so that staff are all getting the same consistent messages that are coming down from staff and from management, and the same consistent support. So I think what our staff can expect when we talk about future operating models and operation structures is that moving forward we need to have a team and a leadership that is far more interconnected and makes collective decisions and keeps that collective overview of what's going on. So there is that consistent thread from management to frontline service delivery about how people are going to be supported and the decisions that are taken and when they're taken. And that's what we need to work towards, because I know that inconsistency has caused a bit of rub and frustration in certain areas, and we need to make sure that we address that. Sue, did you want to take question two? Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, carry on. If you'll hand over to Sue now, that's perfectly fine.
Thank you, Chair. So through you, Chair, in terms of support to employees who have mental health or, in fact, physical health challenges as a consequence of the current situation, I suppose there are two parts to that really. There's the part in terms of employees who may be, in terms of their physical health and well-being, that may be impacted by COVID itself, and we're providing support and advice to that group of workers. And also in terms of their mental health and well-being, we're providing support. And then in terms of the general mental health and well-being of our workforce, we've got a lot of resources that sit on the council's intranet. We have a toolkit for managers in managing staff, so in understanding what that means specifically in relation to mental health and well-being. We've got a counselling service that runs 24/7 that's free access for all of our employees and elected members. And we provide a significant amount of training both to managers and employees in understanding mental health and well-being. And we ask questions through our employee surveys as well to try and understand whether there are any particular issues that staff might be struggling with or might be focused with. In terms of particular challenges around people who may have been working in an office and are now working from home for the vast majority of their working week, that in itself for some of our workforce has created challenges and pressures on their mental health and well-being. And we also provide support and training around specifically that. So for managers managing staff remotely, and for employees working working remotely and what those challenges might be. Where we have specific cases of individuals that are identified as potentially being at a higher risk or more vulnerable, then we look at putting specific support measures around those at a very individual level, to make sure that we're helping them as best we can. And that might involve, for example, access to counselling, but also might involve looking at the potential to bring them back into an office for a limited amount of time, obviously in a COVID-safe way, if that's going to help support them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does that answer your question,
Chair,
Liam?
may I ask a couple of supplementaries?
Yes.
Thank you. So there is still a delay on my side. It's kind of like, on the news when you see people ask a question, then 3 seconds later they respond. Yes, I think Neil. I'm inclined to agree with you on the points you made about communication, especially around it being probably a lot easier internally than it has been in the past. I myself have found it much easier to attend meetings or receive information through all member briefings by simply logging on to a Teams meeting rather than traipsing all the way to Albury to the council house. But I just want to drill down a little bit more into that question around communication with the general public, especially around either service redesign or service restarts. I know earlier in the year there was some frustration in the community around the restart of grounds maintenance services, and I just wanted to see whether there's anything specific there that we can point to that we've now learned that we can apply in the future. The second point I wanted to make was around the new operating model. Excuse me if I've got the wrong end of the stick here, but it may be that many more members of our staff, after COVID has passed, continue to work primarily from home, if not all the time from home. So again, my question is around the public's perception. Have we started to think about how we begin to communicate how different the council will be to the public in the future? Because I'm aware that for many members of the public, and particularly of those of, say, my nan's generation, the council wasn't so much an organisation, it was a building. It's a physical building in your town. It's the town hall or your local neighbourhood office where you go and pay your rent or you go and pay your council tax. So have we begun to change the public's perception or prepare them for what the council will be in the future if we are perhaps looking at having less of a physical presence in the community? And also just a small question for Sue around what she just said, particularly around staff that they've identified who may require another layer of support. How are staff identified through that process? Is it through their line managers and then fed back into the occupational health team, or how exactly are staff members identified? Thank you, Chair.
Neil, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, certainly. I pick up on the issue that, there was frustration around the restart of grounds maintenance. I suppose, what have we learned from that? Well, internally, the challenge around restarting grounds maintenance was the logistics of it. Obviously, the reductions in the number of staff, having to make sure we'd got the right risk assessments in place. I suppose the learning is maybe we should have communicated that we were going through those steps rather than almost waiting for that point to say this is when the service will restart, and maybe sharing some of that information and that planning and that discussion so people can understand the problem. I think recognising that we now have a process going through our reset and recovery board where communications and sharing their communications with public about service restarts and what's happening, sharing information with staff is part of the whole restart process, and something that managers have to demonstrate that they're doing effectively to us or show us their plans, so we know that that's happening. So we have picked up the lessons. That's not said there's not more that we can do. but yeah, we work on that moving forward. In terms of the operating model, I guess, yeah, you're right. There will be an expectation that from the public that the council is a building and it is a place. And I suppose ultimately, with any model that we put in place, is if people are making a visit to our door, whether it be at the council house or one of our locals or a neighbourhood office, that they walk in knowing what they want to get sorted, and they walk out knowing that that's been sorted. Now, if that's done via staff being in the office, staff accessing into that office remotely, or as providing that service, that's what we need to design the model around. So we're really conscious of that. That's still a work in progress, but you're quite right. Once we have got that model, we do need to do that forward thinking, that engagement, that testing it with members of the community, members of the public, to say, would you be comfortable accessing services like this? Does this feel right for you? Does this meet your needs? We don't want to create a barrier. The world of Teams and Skype, remote working, being able to do that is really good and it helps us be efficient. But if we can't be as effective delivering services, then we've got a problem, and we need to balance that in any decisions that we make. And when we do that, we need to test that with the public, but then we also need to share, this is what it's going to look like. So that is still a very much a work in progress, and one that we'll obviously share as we move through it in the next stages of the reset and the recovery process.
Thanks.
Chair, did you want me to pick up the question around the other question?
Yeah, you could please. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the question in relation to how our employees identified, there are a number of routes that employees become identified through. So one route clearly is through their line manager speaking to either occupational health or somebody in HR, identifying that they are concerned from one-to-ones or from discussions that they've had with those individuals about their well-being. Alternatively, it could be through somebody ringing up occupational health and directly and asking for support or raising concerns, or by ringing HR from line. So the vast majority are through managers, but there are those alternative routes if people didn't feel comfortable raising that kind of topic. So any one of those routes will get an employee the support that they need.
Thank you for that. Does that cover everything for you, Liam? And are you okay to move on now? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Bob Piper now, who's been waiting patiently. Thank you for joining us as well, Bob.
Yeah, apologies for being late, Luke. But actually, as someone has had an afternoon looking after my grandchild, I can imagine the staff that have got young children were probably desperate to get back to work, I'd have thought. Certainly if they had an experience like I've had today. I was really looking to give out some plaudits to Neil and the Revs and Bens people, really, because when this first kicked off after lockdown, I was getting it after about a month. I was getting a lot of grumbles from people, small businesses, particularly around Bearwood, saying they hadn't heard anything. And the team sorted every single complaint out pretty much straight away. And most of the time, actually, it was down to the fact that there were disparities between the information on the form and the information in terms of the register of the businesses, as I understand. So it was sorted out well and sorted out quickly. What I was wondering was, were there any challenges going forward in terms of the Chancellor's statement about the revised method of providing business support? And does that prevent us with any additional challenges? And am I likely to have the same problem with people coming back in a month's time saying they hadn't heard anything?
Do you want to come in on that, Neil? We lost you then a second, Neil.
Sorry, I was just sorry. I'd got my speaker on mute. I was saying I think David looks like he's poised to dive into that one.
Yeah, I think there are quite a number of challenges that we've got to face to unpick some of the recent announcements from government. I suspect the most challenging one for us at the moment is you'll probably be familiar with the new lockdown grants allocations of £500 for those individuals who are forced to self-isolate because they're symptomatic of COVID. And again, the work that we did with the business grants and the discretionary business grants, the team pulled well together, and thank you for the compliment, because they, as a team, they worked really hard under the circumstances. Our next battle now is to get the local lockdown grant process sorted out. It's got to be up and running by early October. And we've got to design a process for the allocation of those grants. We've got to work with DWP to ensure that eligibility is checked and that we can get those payments swiftly to everybody that we need to. And I think probably that plays into Councillor Priest's comments as well about accessibility, getting information out to local people so that they know that these grants are available. And one of the things that we're doing, I guess I'm going off on track slightly, but one of the initiatives that we've got as a council is when people get notified to Public Health England that they've got they're symptomatic of COVID, we get their details through on our system, and we'll start to write to every individual who's been notified to the council as having COVID with a range and an offer of help, and certainly things like the lockdown grants are in that letter so that people can know how to apply. There's issues about digital inclusion there, because I think at the moment the application is digital, and as I think Neil recognised earlier on, not everybody has that accessibility. So long answer, Councillor Piper, but there are lots of things through the council that we're having to work through the detail. A government makes an announcement, places responsibility with the local authority, and we need to think some of that stuff through, and clearly as we do, we'll share that as quickly as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Are you happy with that response, Bob? Yeah. Any more questions before we move on? No, I did. Oh, are you indicating, Elaine? Do you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just a comment. We're talking about the support for the workers and working from home. We've still got some people who are out there on the streets working, and we're putting support in to help them with their mental health as well.
Do you want to respond to that one, Neil, or Sue?
Yeah, I think Sue's going to pick that one.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, we do, Councillor Giles, that is a quick answer to that. The support that we have in place is for all of our workforce, and where there are frontline workers, we find different ways of making sure that they get that information about how to access services, because like the previous answer, we absolutely recognise that not everybody has a laptop or has a mobile device or has access to that. So we absolutely make sure that we augment all of our communications with communications directly out to our workforce.
Thank you for that. Are we okay to move on? Elaine, are you happy with that response?
Yes, thank you.
Laura, would you like to come in? Laura, did you want to ask a question?
Hi, yeah, sorry. It was really more of a comment just around the scrutiny approach to the reset and recovery thing. So one of the things that we mentioned earlier this week in the Economy, Skills, Transport and Environment Scrutiny Board was that it's actually quite difficult to properly scrutinise a sort of high-level strategic approach in an ever-changing situation that's constantly having to be revised because there's new announcements happening and what have you. So what we had decided as from the Economic Skills, Transport and Environment Board was that sort of at future meetings we would drill down into sort of some of the more the more tangible individual aspects of that and look at it through a sort of a lessons learned and what are things that we've been forced to do differently that potentially could be a better way of doing things anyway, and to take that sort of approach from a scrutiny perspective. So it's just around any thoughts from the other scrutiny chairs on that approach.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good point, that is, because, I mean, I don't think it's a fast moving pace as well. Stuff's changing daily, isn't it? So that's quite a good way to bring it. Has anybody got any comments on that? No? Okay. Does anybody want to move any recommendations or anything, or are we happy? Oh, Liam's indicated he's still got his delay, hasn't he? Liam?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I think I need to get a new broadband service provider, I think. No, I was just indicating to agree with Councillor Rollins and her comments there. I think it harks back a little bit to what David intimated in his response, where often when it comes to large central government announcements, we don't get a great deal of time to either forewarning of them or a great deal of time to process what that actually means for the local authority. So I think yes, Councillor Orange's suggestion is certainly something that should be taken up by the other scrutiny boards.
Thanks for that. Is everybody okay if we move on now? I just want to thank Neil for that.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Neil. Keep up the good work as well.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 6, the senior management restructure. It's over to you, David and Sue.
Thank you, Chair. I think Sue's going to pick up the detail of the report.
Thank you, Chair. Members have got the report in front of them. There are just a few points that I'd like to pick up for members and just take through the process. In essence, really, it relates a lot to the previous item around reset and recovery.
Could I just interrupt, Chair? I've got some presentation, that just a couple of slides that, if you could just bear with me a second, I'm struggling to get on the screen. So there. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, Sue. Couldn't.
Which is the mouse? Are you going to?
Yeah, you tell me when you.
Okay.
Do you want me to move on?
Yes. So the current management structure has been in the council since it was approved in February 2017. So well over 3 years now, scarily almost 4 years. And it was brought in at the time facing the challenges that the council faced at that particular point in time. I think it's quite pertinent the order in which members have received reports at committee this evening, because the previous report absolutely talks about the challenges that the council is currently facing and some of the challenges that we have faced in being able to respond to those. And I'm not suggesting that a new structure will solve all of that overnight, but the way in which the structure is organised hopes to go some way to actually be able to respond in a quicker, more efficient way to some of those challenges. These are the reasons for change that are identified in some detail in the report that you've got in front of you. So the aim of the proposed structure is absolutely to deliver on the proposed corporate plan outcomes, the council priorities, and those that are detailed in paragraph 3.4 of the report, and to achieve these wider objectives. So it's absolutely about a flatter management structure, clearer lines of accountability, being able to organise services in a way that drive improvements in the quality of service delivery, getting the leadership capacity in the officer corps focused on meeting those demands, meeting that ambition, and driving towards that clearer vision of what the council is here to do. Realising efficiencies absolutely is part of that. Making sure that the statutory roles are acknowledged, understood and embedded in the structure, and delivering that joined up approach, so that one team, one council approach with a whole solution mindset, rebalancing the way in which the services are currently organised to absolutely meet the demands of Sandwell residents, maximise opportunities and drive efficiencies. So you'll see there are links back into that reset and recovery process. So the current structure, as it's designed at the moment, looks like this. The purple blob at the top is the chief executive. The blue line underneath that are the 4 executive director posts. And the line underneath that are the director posts. So you'll see that there's a lot of layers, and there's not necessarily as much clarity and understanding, and there's quite a lot of overlap in those roles. So the proposal in front of members today looks to move to a much flatter structure. The green level of service managers and are indicative of the kind of reports that we would expect to see, not in number but in much clearer lines of report. So the proposal in front of members today sees the deletion of the 4 executive director posts with the creation of a deputy chief executive post. The Deputy Chief Executive post has a portfolio of services and responsibilities, so they are not solely managing those 4 directors underneath them, but they have responsibilities that are also detailed in the report that are specifically about them. So they have a day job as well as a management job, if that makes sense. And then the 5 posts reporting to them are the posts that are all about the focus on the delivery of services. So they are the adults post, the children's post, a neighbourhood post, a new post of housing, and a public health post. And then the 4 posts on the other side are very much about ensuring that the organisation is doing the things that it has to do. So the statutory post of the Section 151 officer as a Director of Finance, the statutory post of Monitoring Officer sits in that part of the organisation. A new role of organisation change, which is about making sure that things that are currently happening in each of the directorates are absolutely coordinated across the council, looking at how the council can continue to realise efficiencies, can transform its services, can look at how it organises itself in a more effective way. And that post has things like the service improvement teams, HR sits as part of that, and ICT. So those key services that are about making sure the organisation is being as productive as it can be. And then the final post sitting on that side is the regeneration and growth post, which is also about making sure that the borough is being as productive and efficient as it can be. The structure is flatter than the previous structure, and I think is much clearer in terms of responsibilities. Thank you, David. In terms of the current salary scales, these are the current salary scales. So you'll see that the posts that we are proposing to remove are the 3 of the, well, we're taking out the executive directors, but then putting back a deputy chief executive. So 3 of those, 3 of the executive directors' salaries are removed from the establishment. Clearly, if we go on to the next slide, please, David. What is also important and is referenced in the report is that there needs to be there'll need to be some realignment of the current services that sit underneath the current directors and executive directors, particularly into those posts that are new, so particularly into the strategy and change post and into the housing post too. But there'll be movement around the other directorates as well. So that the point of doing this is to get those services and the service managers that are working in those areas focused on the things that need to be focused on in those areas. So this is very much about the first step in an organisation journey and looking at how we can get a much better, clearer accountability. Both for people in the organisation, but also clearly for elected members in holding the organisation to account. The proposal in front of members is the first stage of that process, and it does realise a saving of around £120,000 per annum from the current salary budget to the new one, and this is the detail of that. So the salaries that you can see up here are inclusive of on costs, which clearly are things like national insurance and superannuation, which is essentially the cost to the council as opposed to the salaries being paid. We don't pay the chief executive £202,000. So there's that saving, and this is the first stage of that process. I'll pause there, Chair, and try and answer any questions that members might have.
Anybody got any questions? I know we've been doing a lot of consultation on this, and I think we've been working with David, and David's cleared up a lot of questions for us. But Liam, you want to come in?
Yes, I don't know if my satellite delay is getting any better or worse. I'm not sure, but thank you for your patience, Chair. Yes, I agree with you, Chair. There has been a lot more consultation on this in the last few months, and that's been very, very welcome. And of course, the Chief Executive's willingness to come to us and have this considered by this committee before proceeding to full council is obviously a very positive thing. I think for me, this of course was originally scheduled to be considered by full council in July, but was pulled by the cabinet member in the meeting, and the reason he gave there, I believe, was to consult. To carry out further consultation with members. I just wanted again some reassurance from the Chief Executive that this will be the case going forward, because I think the frustration that may have existed earlier in the year around this wasn't necessarily around the content or the actual details of the proposal. It was that members may well have felt that they were not consulted beforehand, and something that was fully formed was just plopping out onto a full council agenda, and we were expected to make a decision on it. So I'll first ask for that assurance, Chair.
Yeah, I absolutely give a commitment to working with Scrutiny to develop future processes and programmes and to transform the way in which we deliver services through the leadership team. So you have my absolute commitment for that.
Thank you for that, David. I don't know if Liam wants to come back in here. You'll have to give him 10 minutes to catch up.
No, thank you, Chair. Not for the moment, anyway, Chair. I'll take other members' questions first.
Okay. Can I bring Bob Piper in now?
Thank you, Chair. I think at one of the earlier consultation meetings, I said I'd prefer management structures that give you straight lines and clear accountability, and it's one of the things that I always think works best. It's where you muddy those lines of accountability that you really just get a workforce that is confused, not to mention the public. never, and certainly not to mention elected members. In fact, looking at the elected members structure now for the cabinet, I had an issue in Lightwoods Park, Amberse, and tried to raise this issue, and I couldn't find out which cabinet member dealt with it. Turned out it was a different cabinet member dealt with it if it was Lightwoods House to if it was Lightwoods Park, which is surrounding Lightwoods House. So the lack of clarity about those lines of accountability makes things difficult. And looking at the structures that you've got and the directorates, effectively, I suppose you call them, there's things like planning is in one directorate and housing is in another directorate. And I just wonder whether there's likely to be the same levels of confusion as to who's responsible for something. It's all having clear management lines, but if nobody's really clear who is responsible for doing what, the accountability bit tends to fall down the middle somewhere.
You want to come in on that one, David?
Yes, I absolutely agree, and from my perspective, I think that's one of the problems that we've got with the current structure. It's in some respects it's opaque in that the new structure that we've pulled together, as you probably recognised, I think it was on one of the latter slides. It is really clearly set out, and I think it is in the paper. The responsibilities of each of those directors, so that is crystal clear. You pick the point up about housing and housing strategy. What we've got in that housing post is, if you like, all the tactical delivery of housing, everything from council stock to that regulation function and regulation through what is currently licensing, HMOs, enforcement, etc. So it's all that operational and tactical stuff that sit in that space. And the other post that you referred to, that's the planning and development post. So they are separated out. You've got strategy in one post, and you've got operational delivery in the other post, and that should make really clear lines of accountability within this.
Okay, I mean, the titles change so often that people get confused as to. I mean, I think we've had the. Was it Directorate of Urban Form or something at one stage? I think Councillor Badham went on the radio and somebody thought he'd run the urban farm. It's just so confusing to people that the urban form isn't a title that the general public would tend to use, really. And the built environment, people want to know who's responsible for what, really. So that was my point. And I just picked out the air, really, the fact that planning. You see housing, you tend to think that there's a coexistence between those things, but actually, if you describe it as strategic and operational, then I can see that that's different.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, hopefully we're trying to describe these posts so that people recognise them, and going back to housing, people will understand what that is, because I absolutely agree. We put all sorts of fancy titles in, and you can't always work out what sits where from those. So absolutely take that on board.
Liam, thanks for that, Bob. Liam wants to come back in.
Hello. My hand seemed to go very quickly that time, so I hold out hope. Just building on Councillor Piper's points there around making it clear exactly who is responsible for what to the general public and to elected members. What are your plans, David, for making that clear to the general public and to members in terms of effective communication? I suppose this comes back to my point on the previous agenda item around effective communication as an organisation. I mean, I want to know as a councillor who I need to escalate my casework to if I haven't received a resolution through the lower management tiers. I'd like to hear how exactly you plan to do that.
I mean, obviously the most direct route for that, councillor, is through our internet and our intranet, so that we are really clear. And it would be great if we moved to an interactive space on our internet that would enable us to do this more effectively, and we will get there. But putting information out through the intranet so that members can clearly see whose responsibility it is for specific areas. And I don't think that would be too difficult. I think there are other ways to get the messages out to members. I think one of the things that, and again, I take a view from members on this, but we've had a series of briefings with members, I think, every 3 weeks, and I've personally found those really, really useful to get feedback from members. And we can take that opportunity to talk through the structures with members and take feedback. In terms of feedback to the public, I guess what the public want is something that's really quite straightforward. They're not really interested in who manages who, as you say, and who manages what. What they want is a person that will resolve their problem, and that gives us more clearer accountability in this. So again, using things like our internet page, using things like Firm Step, being much clearer about those lines of communication. I'm not suggesting, councillor, that we've got this all sorted in one go. And clearly, one of the things that that particular post that Sue described, which was around transformation, that's a really key, not that they're not all key posts in the structure, but that transformation post is really key to get the right person, to get that post filled, to help us work through comms, to make sure that people out there absolutely understand that this is a council that listens and wants to do the right thing and be supportive to them. So it is a work in progress. But as soon as we are able, subject to approval by yourselves and full council, we want to hit a communication strategy to get those messages out. I also think that it's really useful, and I think it was one of the councillors, I think it was Councillor Shackleton, said it on the call the other night, inviting, I think, and maybe I've put words in her mouth, but inviting officers to exploit councillors' knowledge and experience of getting messages to the public, and I'm certainly not averse to exploiting your expertise in able to get through to our local communities, and that would be something that we want to wrap into that conversation.
Does that clear everything up for you, Liam?
Yes, it does, and I just wanted to make a suggestion, if I may, Chair, to the Chief Executive. I think that yes, the all members briefings have actually proved to be a very, very effective way, I think, of disseminating information to councillors, and hopefully that's something we can continue post COVID, as they're not a formal meeting. Hopefully they won't be changed, they won't be affected if the regulations go back to us only being able to have physical meetings. But the suggestion,
We've lost you, Liam.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we had the suggestion and then you went dead.
Sorry, I'm still having problems. Yes. My suggestions to the Chief Executive would be the all members briefings are very good and very effective. Hopefully we can continue those. I think the other suggestion I would make is to utilise the town board meetings, particularly if any, and obviously this is subject to the appointment process, but if any new directors are new to that level of management, either in the organisation or they've come externally, then I think it would be a good opportunity for them to introduce themselves and perhaps say to members, this is what I'm responsible for in your town, as well as across the entire organisation, and that may help members gain a better understanding of who's responsible for what.
That's a really good idea. Certainly take that on board.
Yeah, we got that in the end, Liam. Do you want to come back in, Bob, or is that your hand from last time?
No, that's me. I'm done now. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I left. Should have gone. I can't get rid of it.
Okay, no worries. Does anybody else want to come in before we move on? Any more questions? No. Are we all in agreement that we accept that? Can we go down, start with Laura? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, sorry, that's fine.
Elaine Giles?
Yeah, that's fine.
Bob Piper?
I didn't think I got a vote on this, did I? But I'm okay with it.
We're all equal. Are you okay with everything? And I'd ask Liam now, and he might respond in the next 10 minutes.
Yes, Chair. I don't get a vote in this, incidentally, but no, I'm happy with if members of the board are passing a recommendation to accept the proposals. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, so we'll accept the proposals, and thank you very much, David, for giving us your time, and you, Sue. I know it's been a long road, but we've got there in the end, I think. Now we just move on to item number 7, is the Cabinet Forward Plan, and this is just to be noted for information purposes. So we'll note that, and that closes the meeting. I want to thank everybody for coming.
Luke, I always think chief executives ought to be in their little pied-à-terre down by the seaside at this time on a Friday evening, not talking to us.
He ain't allowed out. He's got too much work to do. But yeah, on that note, I'll close the meeting, and thanks everybody for your input.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.